sometimes these slides get stuck. Actually, I do need to say that. Sometimes they get stuck, not while you're cleaning them, but if a bike's been sitting for a year, then you'll go and you try to move these slides, and they won't want to move. They'll be stuck. So just give it a little bit of force, and not like you're trying to break them, but you are trying to break them loose. You can clean this little slide part, the black part, if you want to. If yours are moving as smooth as mine are, you don't even have to clean them. You can wipe them off, but don't spray carburetor cleaner. Definitely don't spray carburetor cleaner on them. If you're gonna use any kind of carburetor cleaner on them, spray it on a rag first, and then clean off the whatever residue is on them. Another thing that I like to do is, if it's not a bike that's mine and I haven't felt how it rides, what I'll do is I'll do this one because it's more directly under the camera. So I'll slowly move the slide up with the same amount of force all the way. Now you shouldn't feel any big jumps when the spring is pushing it back down or when you're pushing it up. It should feel smooth, straightforward. If you're moving it up and you feel like a weak spot, like an easy spot to move, and then it's hard to move again, then there's usually a crease in the diaphragm. So there's a good chance that you should just replace all your diaphragms, because you should have a nice smooth movement that takes the same level of force while you're pushing up on that slide. Careful pulling these out. Don't tear them. Don't get anything on them. Set them aside. I like to keep them in order. I'm weird like that. It does not even matter at all, but I like to keep them in order. Just take them out, set them aside. I'm going to time lapse the rest of it. I'm going to start disassembling this so that I can clean it, get these diaphragms out of the way. What you're going to see is you're going to see me take the cap off. There's going to be a spring between the cap and the diaphragm, usually. I'm hoping it's how this is, and they're not different than all the other carburetors. So there's going to be a spring that's under this cap that pushes on the slide. So I'm going to take the slide out, and the slide is attached to the diaphragm. There's only one bike that I've seen that you can separate the diaphragm itself from the slide. That was a BMW. Most bikes, you have to replace the slide too. And the needle actually comes out of the middle of the slide. So I lay all that to the side. I set them up. I actually turn the diaphragms upside down inside the cap, and I set them there. But it's going to be away from the carburetor cleaner, away from all that stuff. So I'm going to start time-lapsing this now. I saved this one until last, and you might be wondering, why did you save one of the middle ones till last? The reason is because this screw is different from all the rest of the screws. This screw holds in a bracket. This bracket here, this bracket actually holds the choke cable. So when you loosened up your choke cable, there's this screw right here, which hopefully you still have it in, and you still have this little cup bracket, whatever. I'm in my own light. So. And I'm actually putting a little bit of force pressing down on top of this, this diaphragm cap. So there's a spring that's underneath, if you've been able to see through the time-lapse sped up stuff of the rest of the video. So, oh, you want to save this too, little sleeve. So that little sleeve goes with that long screw. So. Diaphragm spring, and I haven't actually seen this before. Well, I worked on another R6. I don't remember taking off the diaphragm side and seeing this. Actually, little arrows drawn to this thing in the middle, which I'm not sure why. But anyway, this seal, the older the carburetor gets, the more this sticks, and sometimes it really sticks to the inside. So when you're pulling this up, it feels like you're going to tear the diaphragm just because of how stuck it is to the side. But just be careful. Don't try to pry it up with something. If you do, if you do try to pry it up with something, make sure it's not sharp. But if you absolutely cannot get this out, just be careful with it. Don't spray anything on it to try to get it out. Just really be careful with it. But usually, these actually came up pretty easily. So for the sake of time, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to take apart one float bowl, and then I'm probably going to pause it after I explain how to go through this and clean it, and then I'm going to show what you need to do to make sure all your floats are moving together, all that stuff. Alright, so I've got the float ball off. You can see I've got a little bit of crust buildup right there. If your float bowl, if this side isn't leaking, then just don't change anything. You can buy these new gasket sets. Very rarely do you put a carburetor set back together and it leaks. This is actually pretty clean. I'm not going to clean this, but if you have like more of this bronzish buildup, because this is supposed to be this aluminum color, if you have more of this bronze color buildup, really scrub it, get it out of there, because this stuff is what gets loosened up by the gas and goes back into your carburetors, clogs up your jets again. So if you clean your jets really well by following this video, and then you go and you don't clean this, then whenever you run the bike again, all this junk is just going to get softened up by the new gas, and it's going to go right back into the jets. So you're going to have to go and clean your carburetors again. If you don't want to do that, then, well, clean this. Q-tips, toothbrush, carburetor cleaner. If you're going to use carburetor cleaner, like I said, it doesn't agree well with rubber, so if you want to take this seal out and do that. I'm not taking the seal out. I'm not cleaning this this float bowl. This is really clean. I do really like this, so I'm not going to bother with it. I don't have a problem with my bike running. It runs great. It's been driven a lot, mainly because it's here in Hawaii. We don't have winter time, so it doesn't get parked for 4 or 5 months at a time. So I'm going to set these aside, and I'm also going to set these in order from how they were pulled off. There's no springs under this. That one's still just as clean. That one's cleaner than all the other ones. Anyway, so now we're down to the inside of the carburetors. Now, there's a few things that happen that cause your fuel to keep dripping down inside the carburetor, from the carburetors inside the engine. Now, your floats can get stuck. Now, when this float is stuck, it kind of allows the float needle that actually sits under here, which I'm going to loosen that in a second. It allows that to have fuel seep in. It's possible that my floats could have a little bit of a hole in them, causing them to, they're supposed to float, right? But if it's got a hole in it, then it's going to have gasoline leak into it, which is going to cause the floats to operate in other than normal fashion. So that could be an issue. I'm going to inspect the seat here of the needle jet, and I bought new float needles, which are these little things that are near where my finger is pointing. So I'm going to pop those in and get rid of the old ones. So it shouldn't really be an issue anymore after this. But I'm just going to go through the basic cleanings though, mainly because that's what this is primarily about, right? So you want to make sure all of your floats are moving about the same. And I don't have any more fuel inside of this, do I? I don't want to dump it out all over myself. So what I'm doing, I need to spin it around the other way. So I'm going to be turning it towards the camera. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm picking up the carburetors and I'm tilting them. As I'm tilting them, slowly, what I'm watching for is all of the floats to move together. Right? So you see them like they're all moving together. They're not going up much, right? But they're going up, they're going back down. So they should be all moving together like that. If they're not all moving together, then inspect your float needles. Make sure the float needle is not getting hung up somewhere. Inspect this little pivot pin that the float rides on. Make sure it's not gunked up and causing issues. Or make sure that you don't have fuel inside of your float. Pull the floats out and check them. And you do want to be careful while you're pulling them out. But I got a little junk there because my fingers are dirty. But you want to pull your floats out and make sure there's no fuel inside. No, it's not that common, but it does happen. There's probably bikes that it's really common on, and it happens to all of that certain type of bike after a certain age. But this is plastic. Plastic does deteriorate. As it deteriorates, things like that happen. You get like little holes and whatever, and it doesn't float like it's supposed to. It is called a float for a reason. It's supposed to float. So it floats in a little puddle of gasoline that sits inside your engine, and based on the level of gasoline, it gets sucked up by different jets. So that's that. But right now, I'm going to go through, since I've already gone through, this is the main thing that one of the main things I wanted to go through is you just make sure all of your floats are moving in unison. So I'm going to go through, switch this back over to T-handle. So that this little guy here, come on, so I'm being careful with it. This little guy is my float needle. This is what I bought replacements of. Be careful, you don't want to chip anything. Alright, that's one. Get in the middle, screwdriver. 2. Alright, so this is the main jet. This will be the larger jet. This is where the guitar string's coming in handy with these jets. That one's still a little tight. So there's no set distance. This is a set number of turns that these have to be set in. As this hole in the middle, which I like holding it up to a light source and looking through, and you can see how round it is. And these are clean, man. I don't even really want to try to clean these, but for the sake of this video, that's what I'm doing. I mean, this bike runs great. There's really no point in me doing this, but you can see what I'm doing. I have the guitar string. I'm going to stick it in once. I'm not going to stick it in a bunch of times. But anyway, I'm going to stick this in just like that. Swirl it around. And pull it back out. So I'm not leaving a ton of scratches on the inside. I stuck the thing in once. I pulled it out. It's not going to make a difference on a dyno. So usually I'll spray carburetor cleaner through this and put the jet through, spin the jet around on the string and pull it out. So you just do that once and then you put it back in. So clean this too. If it's too much buildup on it, you clean it too, but it's not like a jet really. It just has all these little orifices. So these little orifices that go down inside the carburetor, so you can clean these out same way you would clean out the jets. Stick the guitar string in, swirl it around a little bit, spray some carburetor cleaner in first, before you stick the string in. Do that. Stick the string in, spin it around. Camera died, so I kind of had to finish my time-lapse thing early of the disassembly, but what I have done so far is I've cleaned all the jets, even though I didn't really have to. I went through and I cleaned them anyway. I cleaned all the jets and all the, which side is this? So and carburetors 1, 2, 3, and 4. I also replaced. See, these are all the float needles. Now those float needles sit in the float seat, which is here, and I mean these are a little dirty. They're not bad, but these are the new ones. And if you look at it just compared to the other ones, you can see like there's a little buildup on the bottom, right? I think that one I cleaned. One of these I cleaned, but there's a little, like, it's a little foggy, it's a little cloudy, right? So that messes with the seat on how it sits in the. Let me put this new one back where it's gonna go with that float. These I don't care about anymore. But the so the seat, which is like right in there, because that's where that sits. The thing that I just pulled out, the little float needle, it sits around the float, so it kind of dangles off of that little piece that's jutting out right there. And that's it right inside there. Now, as it sits in the seat, if it doesn't have that good of a seal in the bottom, then fuel will continue to, like, whatever pressure is in the fuel lines, because this is how the fuel comes in. It comes in underneath this. So the fuel comes in here, goes in, it divvies out through the 4 carburetors, and then it goes in through those little the float seats, and the float needle is what keeps that fuel from getting into the carburetors. Now when it's off, or is what it allows, so as the float pivots, then it only allows a certain amount of fuel to get in. So whenever the bike is off and there's not fuel being sucked into the engine, what happens is if your float seat is, if it's dirty, if it's corroded, like this one I cleaned, and that was the Q-tip that I used to clean it. You can see hope you can see it's kind of yellowed compared to, well, compared to the new one that I have here. You can see there's quite a difference. So the one that's more over on this side is a dirty one. I really don't know if you can see that on the camera, but so I used that to clean it the best I could. You don't want to use anything sharp, because if you use anything sharp on that float seat, the seat of the float is tapered to match this exactly, to match the point of this exactly. So if I use anything sharp on that, then I can risk damaging that to where it's irreversible pretty much. I would have to buy new float seats, and these are pretty hard to get out. Sometimes there's a screw that holds it in, and you can just loosen the screw and pull out the float seat, and you can replace it if you need to, which that makes it way easier, because you just replace the float seat, you replace the float needle, and you're good. In my situation, I actually had to clean it. So these two are really dirty, and these two were the ones that were leaking into the engine, because I had a ton of fuel buildup on carburetors 1 and 2, on cylinders 1 and 2 inside the engine from carburetors 1 and 2. So the other thing that I like to clean also has to do with the float and how the float pivots, and I like them to be able to all pivot together in unison. I don't want one to get stuck. One thing that would help make it get stuck is if this float pin, this little pivot pin here, is dirty. So as you can see, this one, I believe I've already cleaned it. This one's a little dirty. You really can't tell. Let me roll it around a bit. I guess you can kind of tell some discoloration, but you basically just like, I just put a rag on my hand, spray some carburetor cleaner on it, which is like this. Spray some carburetor cleaner on it, and then just clean it in the rag. So I'm going to do that to this final one right now. It's just drip some on so I'm not spraying it all over the place. This can of carburetor cleaner that I have, it actually I guess it lost the propellant that's inside the can, so it doesn't spray anymore, it only drips out. Also, I should add, because I have a little cut on this finger, carburetor cleaner hurts. If you get in a cut, it kind of stings. I'm not gonna lie. So anyway, I don't like having any dust, any particles of any kind on these little pivot pins, on this float pin, right? Because what happens is the float doesn't pivot like it's supposed to, and it's possible that the float can get stuck in a position where it's more up, right? Because it's supposed to float. So if it's more up like this, then what would happen is you have no float seat, or you have no seal at the bottom down here, that's preventing fuel from coming in, and that excess pressure is on the backside, because the fuel pump that's on carbureted vehicles or carbureted motorcycles is typically around 3 to 5 psi. So you have that pressure that's behind these that's wanting to get in. So you could flood out the flood out the engine, or like in my case, get Hydrolock on a couple of the cylinders. So I shouldn't have that issue anymore because I've cleaned this well enough with, I wish I had something better than Q-tips, but I really don't know what else I could stick inside of there, because I basically, all I did was this. Just stick it in there, swirl it around, and pull it out. With carburetor cleaner on it, obviously. There's no other way I could really think of to clean this aside from taking these out, dropping them in that like a container of carburetor cleaner. It's about the size of a paint bucket. Usually has a little basket in it. You can drop that in. If there's an O-ring at the bottom of this, which there usually is, that O-ring, you'd want to take it off before you put it in that basket, because that carburetor cleaner is going to eat that O-ring. It will eat it like crazy. So that's one of the things that I had to make sure that I do, is I clean those. It's just that whole float assembly is cleaned. The seats, the float seats, just recapping this the float, cleaning the floats, adjusting the float, not adjusting, but just cleaning the floats. I'm not going to get into adjusting those. You'll have to check out another video on that. But cleaning the float seats, getting all that gunk off. You can visibly tell if you shine a flashlight in. It's supposed to be like this brass color that's on the outside, or if none of your brass is this color, it's supposed to be a brass color that's like this. There shouldn't be any gunk on the seat. You'll see on the taper on the inside where that float needle sits. So clean the tip of the float needle, or buy new float needles like I did. I didn't want to bother with cleaning. I just bought all new ones since I had an issue with Hydrolock. So buy all new float needles if you want. Clean the float seat, and then clean the pivot pin, and then after that's all done, pick up the carburetors and tilt them slowly to where all of the floats will move, and they should move in unison. If they don't move in unison, these pivot, I think, about 1/4 inch. Some of them pivot more. If they don't all move in unison, then you want to take out whichever one of the floats, or one or more, however many of them aren't moving together. Clean the pivot pin, clean the float seats, clean the walls of the floats, clean the walls of the float seats, clean this. I just said it earlier, the float needle. Clean that, do that, and make sure it's all good. Like if you look, say like on this side, you have these holes. Those holes are in front of this pilot screw. So this pilot screw is a certain number of turns out to fine-tune the idle air mixture, so that you have that good air-fuel ratio at idle. So your bike would be able to start in colder temperatures. Whenever you choke the bike, it will be able to start well, and in warmer temperatures it'll start up like it's supposed to. So all of that. So if you're having issues with it starting, if it's too easy to start on a cold morning, you might have to adjust your idle air mixture screw, or your pilot screw, whatever you want to call it. If you have trouble starting it whenever you pull the choke lever, then you'll also want to adjust these. But what I generally like to do is every time I take a set of carburetor, I'll clean this well. So I'll pull out this this pilot screw. It's also a good idea to spin it all the way down from where it was when you started and count in half turns. I've already done this, and all of these were all over the place. So I pull this out, I clean the tip. You want to be really careful because you do not want to break that tip off. If you break this tip off, you have to buy another one. So the way that you would put this screw back in is you would screw it all the way down, and then you would back it out to the number of turns that it says that are outlined in the book. So if it says 2.5, then you would back it out 2.5 turns. If it says 4, you would back it out 4 turns. It might even show by quarters. If you install a jet kit in your carburetors, you usually have to adjust your idle mixture screw. So there's different things that need to be done, but it's all outlined in the kits usually when you get them.